And we're live. Today I'm with guest Manny Grossman. How are you doing today, Manny?
I'm doing great, Eric. Hey, thanks for having me. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Now, what's funny, I always sometimes I have different stories how I find different guests. And in your case, I have a tool that kind of goes out and says, "Hey, you were mentioned on Twitter here and Reddit there or whatever." It's called brand mentions. Got an
hmm
AppSumo, paid some money, own it for life, and it emails me. And
hmm
somebody said, "Hey Manny, did you see Eric Hunley had David Crosby related to the Cortland family or something like that?" And I was
Yes,
like,
I remember that well. I remember.
Okay,
Yeah.
so who's Manny Grossman? So of course, I go to the tweet and then I'm like, well, let me look at you up. And I look you up and I'm like, Son of Sam cult. What? And I literally had never heard of the Son of Sam cult, and then go to find out that, oh, it's a Netflix special, dummy. Okay.
Yeah,
A lot of these things slip by me. I got
right.
a day job and I'm doing different things. So I was like, okay, well, that sounds really interesting because I explore cults. I've had multiple cult experts and people who were in cults themselves.
hmm
And I have John Tuck coming up, who was a early member of Scientology and
Oh, Scientology plays a
yeah,
role potentially here in Son of Sam.
and apparently he did with Charles Manson too.
Yeah,
And I
that's
had Tom O'Neill who wrote Chaos about Manson. So anyway,
that's great.
obviously I get excited about the different things. And you're doing something that's unique. Apparently you didn't create it, but it was the first I've seen of it.
hmm
And it's kind of like a walk and talk tour
Right.
online. I don't know. Are you using a GoPro? How are you going
I'm
around doing
using
this?
I'll show you my setup right here. I'm using this Crane M2, which is a gimbal, which stabilizes the image. Just for anybody out there who wants to do video work, you need one of these, okay? Otherwise, everything's going to be unstable. And then I have my trusty and very reliable GoPro Hero 9. And that's it. This and a microphone system is what allows me and anyone out there really who wants to do the work of, bringing truth and taking down this evil system. They're giving us the tools to do it. We got to take advantage of it, guys. They're not that expensive.
Yeah, it's cool. And okay, I thought that the GoPro had enough of a gimbal inside of it to pull some of it off.
It does, but I never trust it. I want them. I'm a perfectionist, man. Part of this is visuals, and I'm obsessed with making sure everything is
What
crystal
about
clear.
sound?
A sound, yeah, sound in the beginning was a problem for me. I was using the GoPro's mic, but let me see if I can find this system. I bought one of these, which is the Rode
There you go in a
Wireless
lab.
2 system. Yeah,
And you got a lab
and
going.
correct. It's one of these. It's just a little clip-on. People who watch
Yep.
my videos will know that I always am wearing one of these. It's just a wireless mic, and boy, that opened up everything, because then you can, when you're walking around with guests, I mean, it's obvious basic stuff, but they can do anything they want. They're not tethered to a wire. It's just a fantastic thing. So like, this technology didn't exist 15, 20 years ago. I mean,
Oh no.
yeah, this was stuff that people needed to be in the ivory towers of the mainstream media to do. And that's what's so wonderful about this, is that we can bring these stories to people unfiltered, unabridged, from our perspectives, without running through these evil, in my opinion, these evil systems that really just want to kill us, in my opinion.
Well, sure. And I wanted to point it out though, because I think it's important for everybody to see what they can or can't do. And
Mhm.
and a lot of what you're doing, by the way, doesn't have to be GoPro.
No,
Honestly, my
iPhones are great.
iPhone is equally or even more effective than a GoPro in many, many instances. Plus, I can live stream through it. So
Exactly.
it's
Yes,
so
I'm not.
much power. It's amazing.
Exactly. I agree. I'm not doing live streams just because it's a little too technically hard for me. But uh, Jason Goodman, who I do a weekly show with, he was my inspiration for all this, actually. And
There we
he is
go.
the king of the walk and talk with the iPhone. I mean, his stuff looks amazing.
Now, before we dig into the story, because I know everybody's gonna be like, Jesus, shut up, talking shop. And you got into the walk and talk because you were teaching in like botanical gardens and things like that, right? And kind
Yes.
of giving tours to people saying, hey, over here, this is such, and this is how you make it grow, or
Sort
I'm
of. I was
guessing.
actually like a real on full professor teacher there for quite a few years. And a part of that, of course, was giving tours. But it was really just a lot of classroom work, classroom teaching and lecturing and being professorial and all that to the extent that I am. But as was happened to tens of millions of people who didn't want to participate in this theater of the last year and a half, and we don't want to get too into it on YouTube. We know what's up
I
with
call
YouTube.
It's the world's largest Milgram experiment.
Oh, totally. And let me tell you something. Humanity is failing, at least here in New York City. I mean, this place is gonzo, folks. Do not come here. This place is one of the worst places on planet Earth right now, because the people themselves have become so indoctrinated with this. We're talking about a cult today, right? This is the ultimate in cult activity. And you can't fight it. The only thing you can do is keep your head down. And so I was a victim, just like tens of millions of people. I didn't want to wear a mask when I worked in the outdoors, gardening alone at all these prestigious buildings that I took care of. Little did I know, of course, how vicious the leftist mind was going to be. And people who proclaimed that I was the best gardener in the world, the greatest gift to their building that ever happened. Within 1 week, I was a Nazi. Actually, within a day, I was a Nazi and got fired from so much work. It was unbelievable. These people should be ashamed of themselves for what they did. And then it just kind of spiraled, getting pissed off, getting more and more angry. It leaked into my work at NYBG. We were all online. I was frustrated. Every now and then I would throw a truth bomb at the students. And that got me fired. Unceremoniously fired after 10 years of stellar service. So sitting here shell-shocked, I turned to YouTube for solace, and I found people doing these brilliant walk-in talks. And to me, it became such a powerful medium of expression, because you could speak, you could show. It was just so much more dynamic that I said, I have to do this. It took me several months before I got the nerve to do it. But finally, I just bought the equipment you saw, and I went out and I started. But I started with gardening videos, Eric. I didn't start with Son of Sam. And then I quickly realized,
funny, your channel has that kind of crossover. And by the way, on that note, somebody pointed out it's kind of a running gag almost, which is really annoying. But you've probably seen this in YouTube. You have a monetization aspect, and the dollar sign will turn yellow if you're limited. And in my live streams, within minutes, it turns yellow. It's already
really,
it's turned yellow, and it happens so often that I actually have a drop made.
That's great. I got to get me one of those. Wait, and so what does that mean? That they're dropping your monetization and all that? They're not paying you what you...
Essentially, I'm getting no ad revenue at this point, and then I'll have to request a manual review. It'll take a day or two. Of course, all my views will be gone. So 95% of the video, other than people who do like YouTube, well, they called it YouTube Red, but other than people who pay to subscribe to it or whatever. So other than super chats and things like that, I give very, very little. I'll get about $3 on a video, maybe.
Yeah. I never got into monetization with YouTube because I kind of saw it as a dead end anyway, and I didn't want ads on my stuff, and I didn't want to have my videos, people get into them. The last thing you want to see is ad in 5, 4, 3, and then you got to sit there. True. It's annoying. So for various reasons, I went to Subscribestar a month and a half ago, and it's been a huge success. It's been actually extremely humbling, and I can't believe it. I'm actually now making a living doing this.
That's awesome. Now, to get into the living, because we've got to cover the topic, obviously.
Of course.
The gardening to this is interesting, but it's actually reversed, right? You had an interest in the Son of Sam cult before you started
Absolutely.
gardening.
See, when I first started my videos, people rightly thought I was a newbie to the subject because I had never had a social media presence, never had a YouTube channel, and any of that. In fact, I shunned all that stuff for many years. But I go back to Son of Sam to 1993. Now, I look young, but I'm pushing 50 years old. So in 1993, I was 20, and I was hanging out with a buddy of mine from college. Now, I'm from the area. I live in the Bronx. Yonkers is just 5 miles away. And Yonkers is just a couple miles away. And sorry, I got distracted there. And I was hanging out with a buddy of mine in at his apartment up in Yonkers, I should say his house, and the topic of Son of Sam came up, and his father, who had been a fireman in Yonkers in 1977, told me something very interesting, and this is what started it all for me. He said, you know, Manny, it was weird because Berkowitz's apartment, they showed it. And if you want to show that picture, just it's Eric, it's messed up apartment. You could show any of them.
Let me jump over to that.
Right.
And I had a question for you on that, actually, before you even go into that, because I've heard you tell that I do, research to listen.
Of course.
Why was a fireman inside of his apartment 2 days before he was arrested?
That's a great question. And if you, those who are serious students of Son of Sam know that there was a man named Craig Glassman who lived right below Berkowitz's apartment. Berkowitz was in 7E, Craig Glassman was in 6E. And somebody, I don't know whether it was Berkowitz, but somebody was basically doing arson to him, putting bullets in front of his on his front door, lighting them on fire, making little arsons and fires. So the Yonkers Fire Department was actually in that building a couple times in the week prior, and it was on one of those times. And I know this from living in having dealt with a massive fire in my building a year and a half ago. When there's a fire in an apartment building, the firemen don't just go into the apartment in question. They go to the upstairs and they go downstairs, and damn it, they'll break through your door if they have to. And it's all about making sure the fire hasn't spread. So they went up to Berkowitz's apartment, and my friends, one of my best friends at the time, his father was a fireman. And he told me, Manny, it was weird because, the papers show this messed up apartment and your audience can see it. He had magazines strewn everywhere, graffiti all over the walls. All his furniture was missing and gone. But my fireman's father's friend said the apartment was meticulous. It was spotless. It was clean. Everything was hung up perfectly. There was not a speck of dust anywhere. And so, of course, that made me think, man, what's up with that? How did that happen? And then he said the kicker. He said, did you know that Berkowitz hung out with a cult in Undermeyer Park? And they're the ones that did the Son of Sam shootings with him. Huh? What? No. But being a person who loves backstories, I just like to say I like reality, right? I'm not into these fables that the system gives us all the time. It started me on a research project, and that led to, of course, me reading The Ultimate Evil. If you want to show, it should be there. It's the cover of the book, The Ultimate Evil, which to those of us in the Son of Sam community, the ultimate evil is the Bible. Okay, now,
yeah, it's and you know what? Much like the real Bible,
right?
Actually, that's a great analogy, because I'm not going to question on the Bible. There's a lot of people who question it, verbatim. Like, is this literal or is this symbolic? Like, is this an interpretation of it? And there's some issues. And I've been trying to listen my way through it and everything. And it gets a little clunky. It gets a little heavy.
There's issues.
Yes. And I'm just kind of going, okay, well, that's fine. And then the documentary, I did watch that. I know you tap dance around it a little bit, less and less as it goes, because it's almost like you're annoyed having to tap dance around it. But he was not the most reliable witness up there.
Who, Maury Terry? Absolutely not. In my that's what's so interesting about the genesis of my video series, is that I came into this as a total believer in the ultimate evil with slight misgivings here and there. My main misgiving was that he identified Rush as a satanic heavy metal band, and anybody who knows Rush knows that they're neither satanic nor heavy metal. So yeah, so it made me question a lot of Maury Terry's premises, but I wasn't part of the investigation in those years. So I thought I believed everything in that book. And then when I first started my first video, I was pretty much 95, 98% on board with the book. Now I'd say I'm about 10% on board with the book, because as I research in Yonkers, and I'm doing on the ground oral history research, where I'm actually speaking to people involved, people from the neighborhood, people who knew Maury Terry as children. I'm realizing a lot of very problematic things about this man. And we're starting to wonder whether he was a disinfo agent. That's where it's gotten to at this point. And there's a lot of smoke there of circumstantial evidence. We have not found a piece of paper that said, I, Maury Terry, am deceiving the public. But basically, what I would like to say to the public who is reading The Ultimate Evil is Maury Terry will go down in history, in my opinion, for two things on Son of Sam. One, his forensic work on the shootings themselves. If you read Maury Terry's forensic work on the shootings themselves, no thinking person can come away with the thought that Berkowitz did these shootings alone. It's just impossible. Number two, his work on exposing that something was happening in Yonkers, Eric. We're not quite sure what, but if you want to look in the files, Maury headline. Maury started researching this pretty much right after Berkowitz's arrest. And by 1978, 1979, he was coming out with headlines like this. Now, of course, this is from the Herald Statesman, which is owned by Gannett, which has a whole other set of weird, potential New World Order ties there. So, and then, of course, we have the whole issue of him getting hooked up with Rupert Murdoch and the Daily News and all sorts of weird connections there that might have ties to, further people on the totem pole, let's say. But this article right here is kind of what started it all for everybody. Satanic cult at Undermeyer linked to Son of Sam. And what Maury did was he went to Undermeyer Park and he realized that there was, if you go to the next picture, Eric, it's Maury, JPEG. He found a place called the Devil's Cave. Now, Undermeyer Park is an extremely interesting place for those of you who have never heard of this place. It was owned by Samuel Untermeyer, one of the founders of the Federal Reserve. So right there, he's an enemy in my book. But yeah,
heard of Jekyll
Island. Yeah, I mean, he was hooked up with all of them, Eric. Samuel Untermeyer. But Untermeyer's estate, which then became Undermeyer Park, is filled with all sorts of underground and hidden rooms and chambers. Maury Terry found one of the most prominent ones called the Devil's Cave, which your audience can see him in here now. And he found graffiti that was basically linked to the Son of Sam. You can see the sort of in the foreground under the WL. There's like a circle with the four arrows.
Yeah.
Correct, right? That's all in the Son of Sam letter. Let's find the Son of Sam. If you go to maybe Breslin letter.
Okay,
it's going to be at the bottom of that. You'll see the famous Son of Sam symbol. And so
not in the Breslin.
It's not in the Breslin letter. Yeah, it must be. But anyway, the Son of Sam symbol is pretty easy to find for anybody.
Here we got it on this one, I believe.
Well, that's an incorrect one. This also shows actually that Berkowitz, but it's funny because Berkowitz actually so what this is, Eric, is this is a side-by-side comparison. Berkowitz wrote those words on the left, all right, because Craig is Craig, so much the streets. And then he tried and failed, interestingly enough. The famous Son of Sam, the crazed demon who was writing all these letters for all the years, he actually wrote that Son of Sam symbol completely wrong, which is really weird, right? And then, of course, he was trying to copy the famous style here on the left of the Breslin letter. If you want to show the Breslin letter, Eric, this is interesting, and this shows that there's something more to the story here. Correct.
Text and
that'll be the next picture. It's Breslin letter, and I want to show this to the audience because look at that. That was written by a person who was well versed in architectural drafting. I learned architectural drafting as a landscape designer back when I was a student at New York Botanical Garden. I know how to write like that. Very few people do. One of the sons of Sam, Michael Vale Baron Decharnowski Carr, he otherwise known as just Michael Carr, he was a graphic designer. The Carr family had a graphic design studio in that house. Now, I'm not saying that he was the author of this letter, although we have kind of assume that he is because of other things that we brought up in our video series. But this is not Berkowitz's handwriting. if you want to show Berk handwriting, just for you guys in the audience, remember what that looked like, and then look at this is an example of Berkowitz's handwriting. You could give Berkowitz 1,000,000 pieces of paper, as it says in The Ultimate Evil, and you could give him 1,000,000 years, and Berkowitz would not be able to write the Breslin letter that we just saw. It's just the thinking isn't the same, the flow isn't the same, the style isn't the same, and the handwriting's not the same. So things like that are what got Maury kind of interested in this whole notion that maybe there was something up with the Son of Sam story. And in his investigation, he uncovered that, yes, in Yonkers, there was something happening in the park at night in Undermeyer dealing with cult members who were sacrificing dogs many times. Many times they were actually killing children in the park. And there's a lot of stories of children buried in Undermeyer Park, children killed in Van Cortlandt Park, which is another place that the cult operated out of.
These are, I'm going to say speculative or rumor, right? I mean, you don't have an actual picture of here's a dead kid in the park, or you have a police report of a child who was found murdered in a park, correct?
We don't have those. No, we do not.
For missing persons at best.
At best, but what we do have are police reports and reports of tons of dead German shepherds found on the Aqueduct Trail, hung, shot, and otherwise, right. And then, of course, I've gone out in my video series because, again, one of the things I'm trying to do is establish that something was going on in those years in Yonkers. So I've gone out with at least 2 people to Undermeyer Park, one of whom saw a dead headless German shepherd in 1976 and was chased by cult members. Okay, she was a little girl. She was 12 years old at the time. And then I have a guy who was in 1987, interestingly enough, 10 years after Berkowitz was arrested, he and his friends were hanging out in Undermeyer, and they were chased by robed and hooded cultists hanging out there. So that something was going on is indisputable. But so
let's go back in time. No,
sure.
Because I want to have kind of a timeline narrative.
Of course, I'm
going so much, and there's this thing called a curse of knowledge.
Okay.
And that's where you get so deep into it. And it's like, oh, of course, everybody's been following you forever. It's like, yeah, move on.
Of course, right. Yeah, definitely.
But then there's the other. So let's go all the way back, because I think that there's some speculation that goes a little bit beyond that. Like you have the cult activity. So the basic theory is that there was a cult in the Yonkers area.
Correct.
And it was tied in somehow with the Carr family. They were members of it. And the patriarch's name was Sam. The son of Sam. He had 2 sons.
He had 2 sons.
Potentially could have been shooters themselves.
Correct.
And they resemble very strongly some of the sketches.
Correct.
That are of Son of Sam. And the book itself, Ultimate Evil, starts off with Arliss Perry.
A mistake, in my opinion. A huge tactical error, in my opinion.
Okay, well, I wanted to cover that for a minute, because the interesting thing is he was actually correct on who did it.
Well, I'm not so sure, because he speculated that in that book that there was a possibility that the security guard did it. No doubt, he did write that, and in fact, the security guard was gonna be arrested, and he blew his own head off. But then, if you read the stuff about North Dakota, because Arliss Perry was from North Dakota, if you read in The Ultimate Evil all of the North Dakota chapters, Maury Terry goes to a lot of lengths talking about how it was probably this cult from North Dakota that went out to Stanford, California, stalked her, and killed her.
That is where my question, where I wanted to go with this, is because I wanted to tie up this end. She was murdered. The security guard did it. I think pretty conclusively. DNA tied him. He took himself out while the cops were at the door. There's footage of it, everything. However, I was wondering if you had found any ties between the security guard and North Dakota himself specifically, and to John Carr. And I'm going to ask other questions on the
of course
way here, but
the
North
honest
Dakota is the tie to
Right.
that because John Carr was stationed there for the Air Force.
And he lived there as well in the Air Force Base, and traveled back and forth apparently between North Dakota and Yonkers quite often. I mean, Detective Chinati, who worked with this case with Maury Terry, told me that the Son of Sam killings were organized out of two places, North Dakota and the garage in the back of the Carr household. But North Dakota most likely plays a part in this whole deal, but there has been no definitive link that I've found, or I think anyone else has ever found, with this guy, Stephen Crawford from Stamford, California, and whatever was happening in North Dakota with John Carr and his people. And just for the audience's sake, again, John Carr and Michael Carr were the sons of Samuel Carr. Samuel Carr was the owner of the famous talking dog. If you want to show Harvey, that'll show Sam Carr, that'll show the famous talking dog, and that'll also show Wheat Carr, who's an interesting person because Wheat was named to me by Detective Chinati as someone intimately involved. In fact, he said that he heard her name first as involved with Son of Sam, and he heard her name way before Maury Terry ever came on the scene. He told me that he heard her name while the Son of Sam murders were going on, that he heard that this was his exact quote. And those of you who want to see the video that I did with him, you just go to my YouTube channel. It's Detective Chinati. He says that
everybody go to his channel, by the way, because we are just barely scratching.
Barely.
He has what I don't know,
30 videos,
30 hours,
40,
or 30 to 40 hours of in-depth coverage, and that's where I'm trying to hammer out and get big things to get people to go check it out. But definitely check this out.
Yeah, so Detective Chinati heard, quote, Wheat and her brothers were involved, and he as a homicide detective in New York City got those names while the Son of Sam murders were actually going on, which I find extremely interesting. But Wheat has never been named anywhere else as a potential shooter or suspect, but her brothers Michael and John definitely have, and they were literally the sons of Sam. Now, both of these guys are like ghosts, which is what's weird. We know a little bit about John. We know that he was in the Air Force. We know that he supposedly died on the Air Force, although I've heard from two separate people, both from Yonkers, both intimately involved with these people, that John faked his death and he was living in New Hampshire. And even Maury Terry in the book, and this is what causes me, and particularly my investigative partner, Jason Goodman, this is what causes us a lot of angst, because Maury in the book goes to a great length of talking about how John Carr was killed, but then he says at the end of that chapter that the body wasn't the same, it was shorter, it didn't have any signs of drug abuse, it had a tan on it.
I had a question about that.
Yeah.
Because this really bothered me. I some of these things, you got to understand, I was in the military, so that gives me kind of a perspective to go, okay, well, that makes sense, that doesn't make sense, that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Where the hell is this picture in the Air Force? Because every soldier, every service member, and I think it's pretty much always been this way, because my dad was a Marine and he was in the Marines in like 1962. So well before this. Right. So it's not like they just said, oh, we're going to stop doing pictures for a while and then we're going to resume doing pictures. There should be a document and a record of him. And this is the part that's bothering me a little bit about Maury. Is like everything's salacious, he's all over, but I want the pedestrian.
That's what I wanted.
The very, where's his DD-214? Where's his, and that's severance document,
right?
Where are his military records? And if he is dead, who's put in a Freedom for Information request? And by the way, I'd recommend it. Have you done that yet?
We have not.
Information request for John Carr's records, because who said he's dead? This is all rumors and speculation.
Exactly.
There should be a record of him in the military. Go contact Missouri, say, where is this guy? And put that in.
Well,
just
Eric,
a suggestion.
Listen, after this show, or maybe tomorrow, you and we should talk about maybe if you have 5 minutes to give me the procedure of doing that, because I am absolutely convinced that the whole John Carr story is a complete mystery, just like you're having some issues with it. The guy's a ghost. I'm not even sure he really existed. I mean, that's what kind of how crazy it gets. Some people speculate that John and Wheat are the same person. Now, I'm not going there. But what I am saying is that this guy doesn't seem to even really have any pictures. He doesn't seem to really have a history. And then, of course, when you get into the recent work that we're doing, exposing Son of Sam as a potential MK Ultra event, a potential Project Phoenix, Operation Gladio type event perpetrated on the American public, well, then you can get into, then it's more believable to think that maybe John Carr didn't exist, or that it's just a cover story, or that kind of stuff. Because you bring up excellent questions, Eric, and we have the same exact issues. I no longer believe Maury Terry just by default. He has a problem. John Carr's story is weird. Even Michael Carr, we never saw a body, we never saw a picture, nothing.
A little light humor.
Yeah, I see L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah, watch out,
But yeah, the whole John Carr story is a mystery. Here's a picture. Here's John Carr in high school. I mean, this is actually one of the very few pictures that exists of the guy.
Well, yeah, that was the other thing, because I was looking around to try to find better shots. I have another show that I do with somebody, and
yeah,
that's part of it. And John Carr is over here, and this is, I blew it up, tried to clarify it more, but
he's on the right, all the way in the middle row on the right, and that's John Carr. And what's interesting about,
I can't tell anything about it.
What's interesting about that,
sorry,
what's interesting,
if I share it.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. What's interesting about this picture is that this picture actually gets us into the Karen Wahlstrom story, which is really the story that put me on the map in terms of Son of Sam. Karen Wahlstrom, if you go to Karen Body, Maury Terry gives her like a paragraph in the book, and he doesn't even name her. But I thought this was one of the linchpins into getting into Yonkers. This was a story about a woman found dead in Van Cortlandt Park. She lived in my neighborhood here in Riverdale in the Bronx, but she taught at a Catholic school in Yonkers called Sacred Heart High School. And we don't want to get too into it. We don't have the time to go through the genesis of this whole thing. But the upshot is that her body was found and it was deemed a suicide. But it has since come out that she was actually potentially murdered by the precursor of this cult that ended up doing the Son of Sam crimes in Yonkers. That she was murdered.
What year was it?
1965, so 12 years before Son of Sam. And if you go back to the John Carr picture, and what's interesting about this photo is that there's another individual in this
in high school, or
in this photo, in the John Carr photo at high school. Now, I'm not going to say who it is because this is sensitive stuff and people in Yonkers get really crazy about this. But there's a boy in this photograph who I have been told was the murderer of Karen Wahlstrom. So it gets very interesting. And this is what really opened me up to the thought that, hey, there's a human story here in Yonkers that has been untapped up until this point. And I made it my mission to go back in time to the 1950s and find out what in the hell was going on in this Yonkers neighborhood that spawned these kids that ended up becoming murderers in the 70s. And Eric, what I'm finding is a nest of pedophilia, pederasty, child trafficking, child pornography, strange doctors that are connected to neuropsychiatry and the Phoenix program, all living within a 1 mile radius of each other in Yonkers, and are all surrounding this Undermeyer Park area. So the Karen Wahlstrom story is extremely interesting, and that's what actually started to open up Yonkers for me. In terms of the human story. And now it's gone nuts. I mean, I am so hooked up. I might even be meeting one of the former Yonkers mayors tomorrow morning, at a bar, weirdly enough. But
wow.
So that's the kind of things that I'm doing now. I'm speaking to the power players, the people who were there, as opposed to actually just reading Maury Terry's book and then having arguments with other people about who shot who. And in many ways,
that was my question is, are you I know you were probably using the book as kind of an outline, but have you kind of just stepped back now and just said, okay, let's kind of put the book on the side.
I have.
And let's just say here is a baseline thing. There seemed to be a cult.
Yes.
And it started somewhere around this time. Let's just trace all cult activity without any thought whatsoever of quote Son of Sam. Just quite literally, let's just follow the cult alone and see where that trail takes us.
Eric, you're a freaking genius, man. You hit it right on the head. In doing this research and in speaking to Yonkers people, one of the things that has become very clear to me is that Maury Terry has a very bad reputation in Yonkers. Everybody thinks, excuse my language, but everybody says that the biggest quote is that guy was full of shit. He brought people into this who shouldn't have been brought into it. And I'm finding that there was indeed an Undermeyer cult. Absolutely. And of course, Berkowitz lived right near there and all that kind of stuff. But the question that I have now, and I'm serious about this, is what actually did the Undermeyer cult have to do with Son of Sam? And the answer, sadly, especially to those of people who are invested in this story, the Undermeyer cult might have had nothing to do with Son of Sam. That might have just been some weird milieu that was there, that whoever was.
That was what I was wondering.
Yeah.
Like, okay, because look, I'm slightly older than you are, and kids are morons, especially when you didn't have. Well, you got proof of it now. They're on video and they're putting it in on Facebook and everybody can see it.
Yeah.
But there are some just really disturbing, gross pranks that will take place, especially when you bring in some alcohol, and you bring in bored kids. And you had brought up, what was it? You know, the whole satanic thing. Well, some of that is just deliberately to irk people. I'm not going to say that they're necessarily deep believers in this, but maybe they are. I don't know. I've had Ken Lanning on. Ken Lanning was in charge of sex crimes at the FBI and got into a lot of trouble because he kind of shut down a lot of the satanic panic and the whole McMartin. I think it was called the
McMartin case.
Running to school, and they, there's a lot of real serious questions about that. Kind of like you said, Rush. Obviously they weren't. Some of it was just pranks.
Right.
Now, I think about it. You had mentioned. I'm trying to think of the proper time. So just say golden showers on each other or whatever. And you were saying, I don't know why the hell they were doing that. And it flashed in my head. I grew up with goats. And I don't know if you know anything about goats, but a lot of times satanic representation is a goat, right?
Right.
The male goats were always kept on the other side of the property as far as they can. Because guess what they like to do?
Pee all over everything?
Themselves.
Oh.
They would send them. I'm not kidding. It was, and they stank to high heaven.
Right.
And nobody could ever want to be near them. It's like, unless they were, castrated, they were horrible. Okay.
Right.
And they stink. So that just kind of popped into my head that you probably have some moron humans that are imitating a goat behavior because of Code of Satan and stupidity. I don't know.
Who knows? There was something going on. I mean, Eric, I have a woman who, when I did the Wahlstrom story, I was called by a woman who grew up in that neighborhood, and I know also for a fact that she was one of Maury Terry's contacts as well from the neighborhood. She told me some harrowing stuff, my man. She said that in 1951 she was brought down to Undermeyer Park by a guy who showed her child pornography. And there were German shepherds there, and the guy said to her, "We're druids. We're here just worshiping the trees." And she was sexually molested and abused at that thing. So this was, and then of course I have this article here. Let me find it real quick. Unt 2. It's one of the last ones. And this is a story about a guy who they arrested in like 1970 something, early, maybe even the 60s even. Police nabbed man 76 in pornography case. Well, guess what this guy was trying to do? He was trying to show child pornography to people in Undermeyer Park. That's the famous statues at Undermeyer Park that you guys see in this picture. And then go to this
creep with a trench coat.
Right. And then go to Unt 1, because this is interesting too. It's the picture right before.
Oh, nice.
Check this one out. Teenage dope orgies shock Yonkers, right? And this is 1964. And this is all about how Undermeyer Park by 1964 was known as a sewer, a denizen of junkies and heroin addicts. So very,
What is
very.
Yonkers known for, by the way? Sorry to interrupt, but I like to know what the area is. And
Well,
you said it's tied to the Bronx. They're kind of like
yes, it's
bumpered up to
physically tied to the Bronx. Yonkers borders South Yonkers borders North New York City. So you literally just, it's not a bridge or a toll or anything. You just walk across the street, you're in Yonkers. But Yonkers is the fourth largest city in New York. If it wasn't for New York City, it would actually be considered a huge metropolis. A lot of industry, a lot of famous people came from there. Of course, Son of Sam happened there as well. But what's interesting is that Son of Sam is taken out of context. There were these weird crimes going on in Westchester County, New Rochelle, Yonkers. There was the Dart Man incidents, and that took place in 1975, where a guy was driving around and shooting people with darts. There was a guy who was going around and shooting people in their homes with a rifle, and he killed a person doing that. So there was this weird
They don't
stuff.
sound dissimilar to the Son of
To
Sam.
the Son of Sam, right? And so yeah, Yonkers. People say Yonkers is bonkers. City on the hill where nothing's on the level. It's like
what is it known for? Like, okay, Pittsburgh is known for steel.
Steel.
Industrial town. What is Yonkers known for?
I can't really say that I know what it's known. I mean, it had Otis Elevator. It had huge carpet factories. There's a Domino
blue collar town.
It's yeah. I mean, it's both. There's areas there that are the biggest mansions that you can see. I mean, if you go to the last picture, Yonkers North Broadway. Here's a mansion that's right in the area where Berkowitz lived. So
I was just curious because these things kind of follow different people. It sounds like there's nothing really specifically identifiable that would make Yonkers bonkers.
Nothing really
attracting weirdos.
It does definitely have an attracting of weirdos, especially in those old years. But yeah, I mean, the things that we're finding this guy, Dr. Albert Laverne, who's extremely interesting, who's never been brought up in Son of Sam research. And this is actually important for your audience, I think, because Albert Laverne, Laverne, was given to me by a member of the crowd, and I do this whole crowdsourcing, trying to get the audience, the hive mind of the internet, to solve these things too, and it's been unbelievably successful. So I had this lady named Byrne come out with me, and she just off the cuff talked to me about this weird doctor that lived across the street from her, also right across the street from Undermeyer Park. She said that his 2 kids were in this cult that were chasing her. It turns out that this guy, Eric, Dr. Albert Laverne, was the head of psychiatry at Bellevue, was one of the lead defense witnesses in the trial of Albert Cali, the My Lai massacre guy, and that his testimony was expunged from the records for potentially being dangerous to either national security or embarrassing to the American government. But, there's wisps of Project Phoenix around the My Lai massacre and Vietnam War. So was this guy, Albert Laverne, a project? I mean, again, we're just spitballing and asking, was this guy Laverne a mind control person? And if he was he part of this whole deal? Because he was there right in 77 and 78. In fact, he burnt his house down. He arsoned his house in 1978.
This is where it's weird too. And sorry to hijack again.
No, I talk too much.
A lot of the mind control. Well, you are the guest, dude. A lot of mind control, especially the heavy stuff, was 1960s. 68 was a big year for it, obviously, into Manson,
right?
Boston. You had like hubs that were going on,
right? And
there were a lot of counterculture things here, and obviously, yes, Mark Pugner, MK Ultra, and that's. We haven't. Nobody's found a conclusive link, as far as I know, to that. And I always want to be careful because I was talking to Manny before the show, and I believe that you can have something weird going on here,
yes,
and something weird going on here, and it might involve a lot of the same people, but that doesn't mean that they all know each other.
Exactly, and I think that's where Maury went wrong. He brought in everybody and their mother into this story.
The process.
Forget about that crap. Maybe there was 1 or 2 people who hung out at Undermeyer Park. I mean, possibly. But so far, no real definitive link has been made. I have more proof that Albert Laverne was involved than the process was involved. But getting back to your point about this whole, using useful dupes and having and running these experiments, if you think about it, if you're a doctor like Albert Laverne, really, really interested in psychiatric experiments like he was, what better laboratory than a park filled with junkies, literally right next door to you?
Acid, though. Were they
acid and heroin? Acid and heroin.
Those are the CIA specialties. Those are the two favorites.
I even have a doctor from Yonkers, Eric, a Dr. Frank Beauvais, who worked for Sandoz Labs. And his specialty was ergot, ERGOT, which maybe your audience knows. That's one of the ways that that's one of the ingredients in synthesizing LSD. And I spoke to, getting back to on the ground research of this, I spoke to a guy. I have a guy who's a contact of mine, he's a great guy. I love him, but he had drug problems. He was a junkie. He admits it. He was a junkie for many years, and he told me, Manny, Sandoz Labs LSD would occasionally come up to Undermeyer Park, and it was the biggest deal ever. When the word went out that Sandoz Labs LSD was coming in, everybody congregated on Undermeyer Park for a tab of it. So I have Sandoz Labs LSD coming in direct to Undermeyer Park.
Year again?
I got to find that out, but it's probably the late 60s. But I have to find that out.
Yeah, that's when the CIA was possibly seeding it out there. I mean, Ken Kesey somehow was, stumbled into an unlimited supply.
He's full of shit. He's what I call a culture bomb.
I think he was duped. No, I think he was used by the CIA, and yeah, I mean, it was like, here, take this. Hey, show all the kids.
Right.
And so I am curious. I'd love to see.
I can find that out
how
for you.
That shakes out. Yeah.
I'll find out the exact years. Yeah, because I mean, I don't look, as I say to my audience, the more I learn, the less I know. I'm not going to be like Maury Terry and write a book and say, this is definitively what happened, because as we're seeing, I'm pulling this book apart and showing you guys the mischaracterizations, the outright lies, the deceptions. But I'm also praising it. Like I started, he's going to go down in history for his forensic work on the shootings and making the world aware that something was going on in Yonkers. But what that something is still a freaking mystery. But we are actually going to answer a few questions this coming week, Eric, and the coming next 2 weeks, because as this series of mine grew and grew, I became hooked up with the actual players of the Son of Sam investigation. And so I've been dealing for several months now with a very famous detective named Detective Jim Rothstein, who people in the Son of Sam community know very well. Well, Detective Rothstein decided last week that he was going to give me his Son of Sam files, his personal, unreleased, never shown to the world before files on Son of Sam. This guy went back, Eric, he was in Undermeyer Park in 1969 as a New York City police detective because he heard about the pipeline from 42nd Street and the pimps and the Johns and the child traffickers. There was a pipeline from 42nd Street to actually Undermeyer Park, where a lot of people would have sex with children in those underground rooms and hidden rooms that we're talking about.
Was that an actual physical pipeline or just a metaphorical
pipeline? No, good question.
You're talking about aqueducts. So I want to ask the question.
No, a metaphorical, but great question though. Absolutely. And it shows that you're doing your homework. A metaphorical pipeline. And so, Rothstein, and I'll show you guys let me pull it out here. I have it on my Twitter, but Rothstein's package to me came in here and you guys can all see. Well, I don't want to give the address, but anyway, It's on my Twitter. You guys can see it. Yeah, I showed the postmark. It's on my Twitter. But we're going to be releasing these files over the next 2 weeks. The first week is going to be the pre-Son of Sam work, his work on this pipeline and all the people who were involved in it, the pimps, the Johns, the traffickers, the pedophiles. And then the following week, we actually have a list of names from Yonkers from Maury Terry himself. This must have been a document that Maury typed up and gave to Rothstein in the 90s. and on it has some pretty explosive names on it. So we're going to be doing a release of that, and then we're going to make the files public. I'm not Maury Terry. I don't want to keep this secret. I want the world to have all this information. I'm not saying this is the truth, but what I'm saying is now you guys are going to have a lot more access to information that you can go out and do more research on, so we can stop these stupid arguments about who shot Stacy Moskowitz or what member of the process was seen at Undermeyer Park. Because let me tell you, folks, and sorry, Eric, for steamrolling you on this, but let me tell you, folks, this system wants you having those stupid, pointless discussions because it keeps your eyes off of possibly what was really the case going on in Yonkers and what we're finding out to possibly be seriously connected MK Ultra, Project Phoenix, Operation Gladio type stuff concocted by the Daily News, Rupert Murdoch, Maury Terry, even possibly, and people like Roy Cohn, people like this who, in my opinion, it was just a very early trial thing for what we're experiencing now with all of these psyops. So that's kind of where the research is going. And, it's been a really super fun and exciting ride. Made few enemies along the way, but certainly a hell of a lot of friends.
This is an odd one, but have you reached out to Maury Terry's enemies?
Yes, I can't go into it because it's very sensitive, but I have spoken to many people who, and many people close to the story, let's just say, who are severe critics of Maury Terry and who have told me extremely eye-opening things about Maury Terry as a man, as a personality. The only one that I can really get into now is just an insight into the man. I was told by a person who grew up with Maury Terry. He was 9 years old. He was when Maury Terry was 15 or 16. And he said Maury and his friends were the biggest bullies in the neighborhood, that they were literally pushing, as 16-year-olds, that they were literally pushing down 8 and 9-year-old boys and terrorizing them on the sports fields. That's an interesting insight because, listen, have I been mean to people in my life as a kid? Yeah, I think we all have. Sometimes you get bullied, sometimes you bully. There's that weird dynamic. But by the time I was 16, Eric, I wasn't concerned about pushing down 9-year-olds on the sports field. I was worried about girls, music. I wasn't even thinking about that.
All I cared about was a car.
Cars.
Car.
Right.
Freedom.
But you have Maury Terry bullying 9-year-olds. So take that as you will. But
Maury part of them?
This is the $20 million question, Eric. And I never even thought of this until one of my great friends and loyal partners, Jason Goodman, brought up the whole notion of Maury Terry as limited hangout, as a disinfo agent, as the author of the official conspiracy theory, if you will. And I didn't believe it at first. I didn't even give it any thought. But as this work goes on, we are realizing more and more that Maury Terry might have had his own weird agenda driven by personal things that might have happened to him as a kid. And that he brought a lot of people into this that he shouldn't. And at the same time, ignored the real hidden hands, the puppet masters behind it all. I was told one thing about
someone.
Yeah.
You might, it could be too. And again, this is all pure speculation.
Right. We don't
nothing
know.
Compared to you guys. I'm just, like throwing things out there.
No, but it's good.
If you're involved with something and let's say you don't hate everybody, but you hate some of them and you feel guilty, you might shape your narrative to leave a couple people out here or there.
Right.
And be very truthful with the main track of what you're saying. Just, showing that like Berkowitz, obviously, did he grow up there? Or
no.
When did he show up?
He grew up in, well, interestingly enough, for context, your audience should know that Maury Terry did grow up in this neighborhood as well.
Right. And he went to class with
John Carr. Right. He knew all of these people as youngsters, which he lies about in the book, by the way. In the book, he makes it seem like he didn't even know John Carr, barely remembered the guy.
Oh, by on that note, do you have pictures of Maury Terry as a child and his school pictures and homeroom pictures? Because they were in the same homeroom. John Carr could be in the same pictures as Maury Terry, theoretically.
Theoretically, I do not have those pictures. There are a few floating around of Maury as a kid. Zeman used some in his documentary, but I haven't seen any of those. But your question about Berkowitz is, no, he was not from Yonkers. He grew up as an adopted child in the sort of the southeast Bronx, a Co-op City area. So, of course, then the question is, how the hell did he end up on Pine Street in Yonkers? It's a very unlikely place for a kid from the Bronx to end up. And, of course, therein lies another mystery as well. But what I was told about Maury from a local contact was that Maury had this instinct that was correct, that he felt like the lawyers, doctors, judges, politicians, the power players in the neighborhood were somehow running this thing. But that when he got too close, I was told, he was scared off. And that's when he went and started looking at all the street level people and bringing them into it. And in my opinion, he did the world a huge disservice, because we're still arguing about all this stuff. And meanwhile, in my opinion, the true criminals, some of which are still walking around today, by the way, have gotten off scot-free without even any suspicion. And we're going to name some of those people in 2 weeks.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And unfortunately, this is one of these topics that
could talk forever.
Oh yeah. Which is cool, and I'd love to have you back. I'd kind of like to have Jason back. I see he's watching. So
is
Jason, he's crowdsourced the Truth 5, right? And 6, and whatever he has to rename himself every week or two.
Yeah, I don't know what he. Yeah, well, they always are knocking him off. The social engineers are always knocking him off.
I understand that, and yeah, it looks like they're fighting. So I'm guessing that's Jason Goodman. He probably knew you were coming on. And it is a channel.
Oh yeah, there he goes. I see. Just click the profile pic. Yeah, Jason does great work. Jason was my inspiration and my main influence, because when I was sitting there unemployed, shell shocked, wondering what the hell I was going to do for myself, I found Jason walking around New York City at the height of the this whatever this is we've just experienced, and he was showing all the empty hospitals. He was showing some amazingly eye-opening stuff, and it just really. He's the reason why I'm sitting here right now, and I owe everything to, not everything, but I owe a lot to Jason Goodman. So I want to give him a shout out.
Well, cool. And maybe, because I don't want to, we can go on forever.
Right.
To wrap it up here, but maybe I can have both of you on.
I'll talk to him if he wants to do it, sure. But I can come back on, because we barely scratched the surface. Yeah. And also
I definitely have more, because I want to know one thing.
Yeah.
One thing that stood out to me, and it was just a side thing that, and maybe I'm just dumb and low level, but it seemed like in the shootings, some of the shooters sucked.
Yes.
And at least one was a dead on expert shooter handling a 44, which is not an easy weapon to handle.
Well, there you go, Eric. Once again, showing that you've done your homework. Yes, that's another thing, another bit of evidence, circumstantial though it may be, that there were multiple shooters in this. Because
who was the sharpshooter?
Berkowitz. Berkowitz was also a trained marksman. He was in the military. Another weird thing, because
so was John Carr.
So was this guy Taco Grady we've been talking about, who was supposedly Berkowitz's boss in the neighborhood. I mean, we're getting into some serious stuff here.
But in fairness, I got to point out though, because I don't want to go too far down the path. The military being there. Yeah, sure. But then we're talking about Vietnam, and we're talking about drafts.
A lot of people were in the military.
So yeah, you can't read too much into any particular thing.
Absolutely, Eric. And I'm glad you say that, because I agree with you 100,000%. I think, especially having been sort of thrust into this position that I'm in, I'm just a normal guy. I'm just like, you could look me up online. Everything I say about my history is true. But I have people on there saying that I'm a satanic cult member. I have people saying I'm in the CIA. I have people who are saying that me and Jason have been plotting this for years. My point is, there's a lot of crazy people, even in our side of this whole thing. And so you have to be
that's crazy.
Yeah, you have to be very journalistic and very ethical and above board in this. And I'm a trained journalist. I was a journalist for very little time, but I actually wrote for newspapers. So I have this whole ethical thing behind me about protecting my sources, anonymity, keeping things off the record if they need to be. And also part of that is being rational about this whole thing. So yes, it gets insane with some of the theories out there. So yeah, very good caution to people, Eric. I agree with you 100%.
Well, perfect. And this has been amazing.
Thank you.
I definitely want to have you out.
Let's
have you
talk once
back.
I do my data dump in a couple of weeks, because that's when things are
good.
going to start really getting very serious, and I can talk to your audience more about it. Right now, I'm saving all the good stuff for my paid subscribers.
No, that's great. And we can come up with the Cliff Notes version.
Sure.
Good point to it. Also, I like doing this because this gives people an opportunity who are watching this. I know there are questions. That's why there's a comment section. So please ask these questions in the comments. It obviously helps Manny out to see, hey, what's drawing interest, things like that. Helps me out.
Definitely.
And it helps the algorithm, which helps promote this video. And yes, I am a slut to YouTube and want to grow the channel. So there are the bottom line factors of it. And I see Dazed but Not Confused is actually a Scientologist who I
Oh, no kidding.
Who escaped. Fantastic channel. I highly recommend it. He's got to come back on sometime himself. It's been a while. So definitely.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of these. I'm looking at some of these comments here. I guess we don't have time to answer any of these things. But I saw somebody said, "What do you think of Summer of Sam, the movie?" Whoever wrote that, it's a piece of crap, and it wasn't even about Son of Sam. That's what I.
Yeah. He was the background.
Yeah,
and actually, Spike Lee. It was a principle of this was the time in New York.
The time period. Yeah, it was a backdrop.
And New York was. Excuse my language, and I've never been to New York, so I probably should never say it. But from everything I've seen and read, New York was a shithole.
Oh,
and that was during President Ford to New York dropped dead.
Let me tell you something. New York looks exactly the same now. The graffiti everywhere, crime, drug addicts everywhere. Since the crime, people riding their motorcycles on sidewalks. New York has become completely lawless, and all these morons are sitting there going,
too, by the way.
Yeah, they're going, how did this happen? I know you got to go, so.
No, that's fine.
Oh, you
I was going to say, cool. If you want to look back to Escape from New York and look back to Dirty Harry, because Dirty Harry was San Francisco.
Right.
And we're like going right to that time period. So yes we
people
are
love it too.
Descending into the early 70s.
Big time. You guys just had a chance to right the ship out there, and I don't know what happened, but I feel sorry for you. But then again,
expected is what happened.
Exactly. And it seems like no matter who you get, you still get the government. So, we're going to have to start thinking, folks, about our own institutions, our own alternative economies, our own freaking alternative states at this point, because that's where we're headed.
And on that happy note, Manny.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.